So did you see the screen now? Is it visible to everyone?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you.
It's visible for you, right? Everyone?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Okay, right. So as far as, right, so enterprise analysis, the first one is that you need to define the business need. This is the first thing. What is that you see?
We cannot hear you again.
Am I not audible?
No.
How about now?
Yes, you're audible now.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Right. So assessing the capability gaps is what we have to see. So when you are talking about assessing the capability gaps, capability gap, nothing but what is that we are connecting from the existing to proposed. That's what generally we call it as capability gaps transfer. So capability gap, nothing but assume that there was an existing application which is using by the customer. Now you are connecting that application with the other one, right? So that's what we call it as capability gap transfer. So if you'd like to know about the assessing the capability gaps, the very first thing what is that we need to do is, first of all, you need to know about the enterprise architecture. This is essentially required. So let me write down on the Word document so that you will be understood this better. So if we would like to know about assessing the capability gaps, first of all, we must be knowing about gaps. Sorry. We'd like to know about assessing the capability gaps. The first thing what is that we need to know, we must be knowing about enterprise architecture. We must be knowing about
We cannot hear you again. It's on mute.
Raj, it looks like your device goes on mute time to time. Right now, there's no sound coming in.
am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
now
you're
you are.
audible.
Yeah, now you're audible, but it goes on mute time to time.
Right. So when you talk about enterprise architecture, it explains the whole enterprise, right? So this is what generally enterprise architecture stands for. So when you talk about enterprise architecture, so there are 4 more things which we must be knowing. The first one, you must be knowing about the business architecture. We must be knowing about the business architecture. Second, we must be knowing about the application architecture. We must be knowing about the systems architecture. We must be knowing about the data architecture even. So these are the 4 different architectures. Being a business analyst, we must have a clear understanding. Again, I'm repeating, if you want to assess a capability gap between 2 different systems or between 2 different solutions, what is that are we comparing? Right, so there was an existing application where we are transforming from existing to proposed one. What is that customer is expecting is what are we developing now? So if you want to do that, the very first thing what is that you need to know is, first of all, you need to know about enterprise architecture for sure. So what is enterprise architecture? Enterprise architecture majorly explains about the whole enterprise of the organization. Because the solution, what is that are we providing is an integral part of the business. It is not something away to that. So when you talk about the integral part, one must be knowing about the business architecture first. One must be knowing about the business architecture first. So the business architecture clearly explains us about goal, vision of the project. Enterprise architecture majorly focusing on goal followed by the vision of the project. That's what generally enterprise architecture stands for. So the first thing is that goal and vision of the enterprise architecture. That's what enterprise architecture, business architecture stands for. So this business architecture make us to understand about what is that they wants to reach and what is that they wants to define. Second, application architecture. Application architecture means what are all the applications are they using within the organization? What are all the applications they are using within the organization is what comes under application architecture. So that we will be knowing about what are the different applications they use. If you take, for example, if you are taken in a point of sale system, right? So last time I have taken it, right? So if you are taking a retail outlet as an example, what are the applications we use is like we use a point of sale system for billing purpose. Maybe an inventory management system we are using to manage the inventory. At the same time, you maybe require a payroll management system to manage your employees, all that. At the same time, if you take in a healthcare organization, for example, hospital. So what are the applications like hospital management system will be used to manage different departments, even patient management system. Like there are different applications like Epic and all everything will be used to manage patients versus doctor appointments, all that. Not only that, lab reports, everything can be integrated to that. So what are the applications an organization is using? Because you are providing a solution for a particular customer, remember. So when you are going to provide a solution for a particular customer, you must be knowing about what are the different applications they were using in the existing organization. So that understanding and that idea should also be there to us. So business architecture is what is needed first. Second, you must be knowing about the application architecture. What are the different applications we were using and all everything is what we comes under the second one. The third one, we call it a systems architecture. Systems architecture means what kind of systems are they using now and how they are interconnected, if any, right? So that's what is required, because if you want to run any application, there is a system required. So of course, in a simple more terms, I can say hardware and software, right? I can put you that way. Right? So what are the hardware systems? What are the software systems? All these things comes under systems architecture. So business architecture is the first thing where we must be knowing about goal, vision of the project. Second, application architecture, which majorly focusing on what are the applications.
Your voice just broke again.
Hey Raz, can we continue tomorrow? No sound. We can't hear you, Raj.
Are you able to hear me now?
No, oh now, yes.
So second is application architecture. Application architecture majorly focusing on what are the different applications are we using within the organization. Third one, systems architecture. Systems architecture majorly focusing on what kind of systems are they using and how they are interconnected. Because when you are working on application, there are different systems we uses. So knowing about the systems architecture is also essentially required. Apart from the systems architecture, the next is data architecture. So data architecture means how and where the data is being stored and how we are extracting the data when it is needed. When it is needed. So this is what we call it as data architecture transfer. So if you'd like to know about enterprise architecture for any of the enterprise analysis, under enterprise analysis, if you'd like to know about assessing the capability gaps between two different systems, the very first thing what is that you need to know is you must be knowing about enterprise architecture. In this enterprise architecture again, we must have a clear understanding about four different things. One is about business architecture, you must be knowing. So about the goal and vision of the project. Second, we must be knowing about the application architecture. Like what are all the applications we are using within the organization. Third, we call it a systems architecture. What kind of systems are they using and how they are interconnected, all that. At the same time, we have data architecture. In this data architecture, we will be knowing about how and where the data has been stored and how are we extracting the data. So this is all comes under enterprise architecture. This is what the second thing, this is what we have to do under as a part of enterprise analysis. So defining the business need, you must be knowing about business goals and objectives. Second, if you want to assess the capability gaps, you need to know about enterprise architecture followed by the business need. So that here you come to know about the major difference, what is that you found between the existing to proposed system, right? So you will be knowing about two different things. So in this here itself, you will be knowing about two different things. One is existing system. In comparing to this proposed system, what is that you are planning to develop? proposed system. So existing system, nothing but the one which an end user is using it. Right? So this is what we call it as existing system stands for. Second, proposed system. Proposed system means what is that are we developing? This is, please mute yourself. Please mute yourself. Please mute yourself. Please mute yourself. It's disturbing a lot. It's disturbing a lot.
Hey Raj, I think you can mute everybody.
Please mute
On your end.
yourself. It's disturbing a lot.
Sorry.
Hey guys.
Yeah, thank you.
I have muted everybody. So it's a kind request to everyone. Please be very vigilant on what is happening. This is a professional training course. Do not take it very lightly, and right, see, it is not that since we are offering this training class for free, do not take it for granted. Right, so I have rights to remove the persons from this training group. So I don't expect next time if I see anybody like this, I may have to expel them from this training, right? So don't take it easy, okay? So let's respect the time the trainer is providing, and let's respect Fireball Consulting, whom providing for free of cost, but let's not take it for granted, right? So I see a lot of people sometime, not a lot of people, few people sometime, they don't unmute, they don't mute themselves and keep talking their personal stuff. It's disturbing others, right? 100 people are waiting for you, so let's not do that. Okay, thank you. This is Manik. Yeah, Raj, continue, please.
Okay, thank you, man. Right, so existing system followed by the proposed system. So when you talk about existing system, the one which we are using from an end user from a very long time, that's what we call it as existing system stands for. When you talk about the proposed system, what is that are we developing is what comes under proposed system. Means the solution, it means proposed system means the solution we are developing, right? So or we are about to develop, right? So we are about to develop, right? So this is what we call it as proposed system. So understanding about the two different systems is what we do in the second level. It's not only about the business need. Second, we need to know about the assessing the capability gaps. If you'd like to know about assessing the capability gaps, first of all, you need to know about enterprise architecture. Again, in enterprise architecture, there are four, as I mentioned. One is not knowing about the business architecture for sure. You must be knowing about applications architecture. You must be knowing about systems architecture. You must be knowing about the data architecture even. So after that, what is that we require is you must understand about what exactly the application customer is using and what kind of application customer is expecting. Remember here, in the stage of enterprise analysis, we don't provide solution 100%. So we are assessing what kind of solution could be useful to the client, right? So that's what we do in the second case. The third case is about determining the solution approach. Here you need to determine what kind of solution is something possible for the customer, because we have to see the organizational structure, process, all that, as I already mentioned, right? So because whenever we understood about enterprise architecture, we come to know what kind of organizational process and what organizational process do we required to understand. Unless until if you are not understanding about the organizational process, providing and as well as determine the solution approach is not possible. So that determining the solution approach and how you are going to provide, and whatever the aspects we have taken earlier, right? So about either it may be a business need, what we have carried, or you may be carrying the capability gaps. All these things will be taking into an account when you want to determine a solution approach on the third level in reference to the business analysis itself is concerned. Whereas when it comes to the fourth point, you need to define the solution scope. Scope, nothing but possibility. Scope, nothing but possibility, right? What are the possibilities we have to provide the solution is what we have to see. If you want to define a solution scope, the very first thing, what is that we need to know? We must be knowing about some assumptions and as well as constraints followed by dependencies. So these are the three different things. When you want to provide or when you want to define a solution scope, when you want to define a solution scope, first of all, what is that we need to know is that we must be knowing about few things. Means, of course, anyway, this business goals, objectives, right? So all these things will be carried away. Apart from that, we must be knowing about few things. One is about assumptions. Second, we call it as dependencies. Assumptions followed by dependencies. So what are the assumptions we have to keep in mind when you are going to provide the solution? At the same time, we must be knowing about the dependency of the project as well. So scope of the project is what we need to know. So if you'd like to know about the scope of the project, first of all, you must be knowing about the scope of the study, right? So what scope of the study is all about and why is and how it is required. So that is what essentially you must be knowing first. So if you'd like to know about the scope of the project, so this is how it will be. Right, so this is what generally the scope of the project was. I think you could see the screen now, right? So this is what generally the scope of the project. So how to write a scope for a project, right? So this is the first thing, what is that you need to learn here. So normally scope of the project, nothing but what are the possibilities we have to develop a project. What are our, I don't say hurdles, what are our challenges, what are our assumptions, what are our dependencies, what are our constraints. All these must be known to us. Normally, these are two different things. Again, this will be divided into two different things. One is in scope, second is out scope. Normally, when you talk about the scope of the work or scope of the project, whatever it is, whatever it could be, usually this will be divided into two different parts. One is in scope, second is out scope, or internal scope or external scope, either way it is. In scope means which is in our control, right? So what is in our control? What is in our control? Our control, we have, first point is that how much manpower do we have? Second, what are their technical capacity? Do they have the technical capacity to develop the solution or not? All these things comes under in scope. When we talk about out scope, nothing but which is not in our control. That's what we call it as out of scope. Sometimes there are some deviations happens in the existing project. For example, we are working on an application. There are possibilities sometimes there is a deviation happens. Sometimes customer is asking us to do the changes on the existing requirements where sometimes there is a possibility that it may happen. So scope creep. Whatever the scope of the projects we have identified and defined will be deviated due to these factors. This is what we call it as out scope. So in scope is different, out scope is different. In scope, nothing but what is there in our control. Out scope, nothing but what is not there in our control, right? So these are the two things. So once you define the solution approach. What is that we need to know is you must be knowing about the scope of the project first. If you'd like to know about, or if you want to write the scope of the project, so there are 5 steps we need to follow. The first thing is that we need to collect the crucial information. Means if you'd like to write about the scope of the project, I'm saying all that. The first step is you need to collect whatever the crucial information relating to the project we have to collect. So the crucial information, nothing but the first one is about project deliverables. What are the final deliverables we want to achieve in any of the project is what you must be knowing. Means what must be the project deliverables? That clarities should be there for a team. If you are missing out this clarity of project deliverables, then it will be different, right? So project deliverables is what you must be understood in the first step. When we are collecting crucial information, project deliverables is the first step. Second, you need to know about the available resources. Available resources means how much resource do we have at this point in time. Second, is that resources really sufficient for us to develop the solution or not? So that information we need to know. At the same time, what are all to be included, what are all to be excluded? Followed by this, what are the constraints do you have? These constraints may be a budget constraint sometimes, because sometimes what will happen when you are providing solution, there will be some amount of budget which will be allocated. So within that limited budget, we have to provide the solution. So that was the condition. Sometimes it happens, right? So not only a budget constraint, sometimes timelines. Time constraint will also be there. Time constraint within the existing timelines we have to complete, right? That's what generally the point was. So a project constraints is what we see first, followed by in this project constraints we see the time and budget even, right? So budget constraints means within this specific budget we have to complete. This is one condition. Second is time constraints. Time constraint means within the specific timelines we have to complete, right? So these are the things which are available here. So this is the first thing, what is that we have to do when we are trying to understand the scope of the project. The first thing, what is that you need to do? You have to collect the crucial information of the project. Something like you must be knowing about the project deliverables. Next, you must be knowing about the available resources which is required for us to develop the solution. Third, you must be knowing about the inclusions and exclusions of the project. Followed by this, we must be knowing about what are the project constraints do we have. So this is the first thing, what is that we have to do in reference to the project information. What is that are we doing in the first step? Second, you need to build a project schedule, right? So project schedule, in this project schedule, we must be knowing about what are the major tasks and as well as the milestones we want to achieve. Means these milestones, these major tasks and milestones depends on the timelines of the project. Assume that the project will be for about in a year time, right? So assume that it is taking 12 months time for us to complete the project, for example, right? So we must be knowing about what tasks do we require to complete and what are the milestones to us to achieve, right? So in the next coming 3 months, what is that we want to achieve? Maybe in another 4 months, what is that we want to achieve? So that schedule has to be made prior. So first of all, you need to collect the crucial project information. This is the first step you do. Second, you need to build out a project schedule where you need to understand what are the different tasks followed by the milestones we need to achieve based upon the timelines what we have. At the same time, project phases. This is where generally SDLC process, in short, I say, right? So what are the different phases of the project? Something like analysis, right? So what is that we are going to do in the analysis part, right? Second, followed by the planning and design. Next, implementation, testing, deployment, delivery, right? So these are the multiple phases of the project. What is that we must be knowing in the second step? So based on that, we need to tailor the scope of the project based upon the understanding and as well as the inputs what we have received from the organization even, because organization Why are we considering? Because type of organization, type of services, what is that they're providing, style of functioning, varying from one to another, right? Usually it happens. So you want to tailor the scope of the project followed by the organization, based on the organization, what is that we see. Now, once we tailored the scope of the project, so that we come to know, so that we have to compile and review few points, because before you are putting all these things into a scope of the work, means before you're going for implementation or before you're going to start up this, there are some points we have to consider. The fourth step is something crucial for the team to understand the real, I don't say complexity, real understanding about why and for what purpose we are doing and what are our challenges. So that you'll be knowing in the fourth step. The first point, that is it clear why the project is necessary and important? So first of all, you must be knowing, you as a solution provider should have a clear understanding about for what reason we are developing a project and why is it necessary, and why is it necessary and why is it important. So the first thing, what is that we must be required is this. Is it clear why this project is necessary and important? First of all, you need to have a clarity. Second point, not only to you it is clarity, you need to understand about the clarity from the customer perspective. So why customer is required and why customer is very clear about this. So this is what you must be knowing first. Second, do I know exactly who the project stakeholders are? This is where generally, if you remember, we have done the stakeholder assessment. So based on the stakeholder assessment, in that we have identified the stakeholders based on power and interest grid. Followed by this, we have done the stakeholder analysis using RACI matrix, so that we come to know who are our project stakeholders and how to organize them and how to manage them. Anyway, the second point means, do I need to know exactly who the project stakeholders are? So that is the reason why we have done the stakeholder engagement and all everything in the beginning time, if you remember. The third point, will my stakeholders see a value and benefit in the project? Because end of the day, whoever the stakeholders, they should understand the real benefit of the project. So means belief system, right? So there is a belief on the benefit, what is that end of the day they are going to get, and they should understand the value even. So as long as they are understanding the value, that will be reflected on the implementation of the project as well. So that also we have to make sure. At the same time, we must make sure whatever the resources do we have are adequate or not to complete the project. This resource may be a different thing, right? The resource may be a financial or a budget resource, or it may be a technical resource, or it may be a manpower, right? So whatever the resource it could be, we must make sure whatever the resource do we have is adequate to complete the project or not. So that's we have to see here. So are the resources, whatever we have taken, were adequate enough to complete the project or not? We have to see in the third level. Next, we must be knowing about the timelines. These timelines must be realistic for the deliverable, right? So there is no something like exaggeration we do. Timelines must be realistic. What are possible, what are not possible? What are the timelines do we have? How many days or how many weeks time do we have to complete the project, or how many months do we have to complete the project? So what are the practical possibilities while you are developing the solution in reference to the timelines? Do we have any constraints in reference to that or not? So that we have to see. So the realistic timelines in reference to the deliverable of the project solution is what we have to consider in the fourth level, fourth step. Next point is that, do we have sufficient resources for the team or not? Right? So team should have all the resources. Resources means infrastructure, technical resources, all these things has to be taken into an account, because team should have all the complete resources, whatever we have taken, right? So at the same time, not only resources available, that must be accessible to the customer even, to the solution providers even. So we must be knowing about what are the resources are required for the project to develop with, and do we have that sufficient access for us to do it or not, right? So that is the second thing. Next thing is that, we must understand the inclusion and exclusions are specific enough or not, or is there anything additional thing we must be knowing or we must require, will also be taking into an account in this. Next, we need to know, is there any too much room for tasks to be added after the project has kicked off? Means, is there any additional information or is there any additional task which will be used or which will be included once the project has started? Means this is where generally sometimes scope of creep happens, right? Scope of creep happens. So scope of creep happens means there are some additional requirements which will be added once the project has started sometimes. Whenever it happens, obviously what will happen? The scope deviation, whatever the scope we have identified for the project will be deviated. So that is also there. So we have to see, is there any possibility? Room, nothing but the possibility I'm talking about. Room for task means possibility of adding new more tasks and all everything once the project was started. Because what will happen, whatever the goal we have defined, whatever the scope we have defined, will be deviated if you're doing so, right? So we must make sure not to do that. Next, at the same time, is there any project task or constraints I haven't considered yet so far? Means, do we have we taken all the projects, tasks and all everything when we are developing the solution, or is there anything which we have left over? So that also we need to see. And moreover, apart from all that, we have to consider one more point, that sometimes, for example, when you take healthcare applications as an example, because ours belongs to the healthcare application, sometimes if you want to access some information, customer doesn't allow us to do that. Due to multiple security reasons, customer don't allow us to do that. So that is also something we have to consider. We have to consider that point as well, right? So what are the alternatives? Sometimes customer doesn't is giving us the access to access some information as a part of the project. Due to the technical or due to the security constraints, customer is not accessing the servers. So if that was the case, what is the alternate, right? What alternatives do we have? So all these things has to be taken into an account when you are developing a scope of the project or scope of the work, right? So last thing but not least thing, fifth step is that you need to put your project scope at work. So this is how generally the scope of the project we have to do. First, you need to collect all the crucial information. Next, you need to create a project schedule where this major tasks and milestones, what is that you want to achieve, followed by the project phases should be included in it. Next, we need to tailor the scope of the project, followed by the organizational dependencies, all that. Next, we need to compile the review based on couple of factors, what is that I have discussed with you so far all this time. So finally, we have to prepare a scope of work or scope of the project. This is what and how scope of the project was. This is what we do here under enterprise analysis. So once you are determining the solution approach, you need to define a solution scope by defining the scope of the project is. The last but not least, defining the business case, that I am going to discuss it tomorrow. Because if you want to define a business case, there are some points which you have to consider. So what are those points? What are the assumptions and constraints? What are the points to be taken into an account to define the business case that I'll be explaining tomorrow, not now. So defining the business case for any of the project is essentially required. Why and how is it needed? What aspects has to be taken into an account under enterprise analysis, that I will be discussing in tomorrow session. Right. So this is all about for today's session. Now, here is the questions. Couldn't see any questions. Say that, okay. project charter and project scope is the same thing here, right? So this is a question from Anshika. Is the project charter and project scope is the same thing? Yeah, almost one the same. Yes. Yes, Anshika. Right. So this is for your question. Answer is what kind of access does business owner need to get necessary resources? See, for example, sometimes there will be some what we call there will be some information where customers wants to access the data, right? So maybe when we are talking about data analysis, not in terms of the requirements, sometimes when you're talking about data analysis, we need to understand about what kind of data do we require to test for a sample purpose, all that. So that was the case. We require some sample information from the servers, or you need to have an access with the server to connect with. Normally, sometimes customer, due to the security constraints and all that, customer may feel reluctant, or customer may reluctant for us to provide that resources and all everything to us. So that is one thing, right? So sensitive information as customer feel, that's what generally one thing which usually the kind of constraints. The constraints means information will be provided. Where the problem comes for us is that data, accessing the data or accessing the servers. This is where most of the times we get the problem. Otherwise, the resources, whatever the required necessary resources will be accessed by the BA. And moreover, you'd like to know one thing, this is not in reference to the BA. This is in reference to the team, right? So team requires, not only BA, right? So BA require maybe for a limited purpose. But end of the day, team requires it, right? For to do sampling or something like for a data and all that, team is required. So whatever the resource it could be, so what kind of challenges are we facing and all everything should also be considered under the scope of the project. So this is the answer for your question, Dina. Enterprise analysis is what I am explaining from the beginning to you, Fury. You please go through the recording so that you will be understood. What is that I am going to discuss now about enterprise analysis? That is what I am discussing from the beginning itself. Please go through the class recording so that you'll be understood that better. Defining the business need, assessing the capability gaps, determining the solution approach, scope, followed by defining the business need. That's what all comes under enterprise analysis. Please go through the recording. No, enterprise analysis is different. This is for the question from Ashima. Enterprise analysis and gap analysis has a slight variation because gap analysis is a part of this, right? So here you can see here, right? So determining the solution approach here, right? Assessing the capability gaps. This is where generally this gap analysis comes into picture. So gap analysis is a part of it. It is not two different things. Gap analysis is a part of enterprise analysis. So whenever you are doing this gap analysis, they're assessing the capability gaps, their gap analysis comes into picture. I think you understood, Ashma, right? Yes, we have to draft the project scope. Yes, Anshika, yes. Project scope should be understood by us. And scope of the project is what, being a business analyst, we have to consider, we have to write. By considering the points, whatever I have discussed with you so far. All this, yes. No, I haven't skipped requirement lifecycle management. We haven't started yet. That I'm going to start next. I know. So there is a process, because if you know about the business need and all, it will be easier for you to understand, because requirement lifecycle management again is different. Let me show you. This is what generally requirement lifecycle management is, right? So there are different tracing out requirements, maintaining of requirements, prioritization of requirements, all these were there. So that I'll be explaining next. It comes next, need not be worried. I haven't skipped it. Okay, I think this is all the questions I have got as of now. So still under enterprise analysis, Still, we have one more point to discuss with. That is what we need to know about the defining business case. So what is defining business case? What is business case? How to define the business case? These things we are going to discuss in tomorrow's session. Once it is done, then next we go for requirement lifecycle management, all that. Because business case, defining the business case is important. That I'm going to discuss as a separate in tomorrow's session. Is it clear to everyone? Okay. Okay. Thank you. We'll meet tomorrow again. And we discuss about the business case followed by this. We go next. See you then. Bye.